Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth week of this session I've been running around early stage hiring. And today we're going to take a little pivot from what we've been discussing, but I appreciate you all coming here. And we have a lot to cover today, so we're actually just going to dive right in. So everyone who's watched the full series knows we've talked about funnel management, candidate experience. Today we're going to look at our employee populations as a whole, especially right now in today's COVID era. So if you have questions, definitely throw them into the chat. We'll try to address them on this session. I'm Nikki Adamson. I run Hustle Hunters, recruiting firm focused on helping startups hire amazing foundational teams. I'm joined today by Tonille Miller and Liz Penny. One quick note before I bring them in here is the three of us, none of us are doctors or lawyers. So we're giving our own opinions based on what we're seeing in the space and looking to advise. But please seek accurate professional information to determine what makes sense legally and medically as you look to make changes in your organization. So let me bring on our guests. Awesome. Welcome to you both. As we look to get started here, I'm so honored to have you both with us. We'll start with Tonille here, who is an early adopter of the remote work life, and she's really focused on employee experience and is really a transformational leader who I've come to start following and really respecting. So Tonille, can you give us a little background on what brings you to this conversation and your experience with employee experience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I would say I've spent most of my career in the large consulting firms, all the names you can imagine, and really just advising leaders on change management, employee engagement experience, well-being, productivity, and then just really aligning the talent strategy culture to the organizational business strategy so that you can drive that. And then my most recent role, I was actually at a global organization, and I was the VP of Employee Experience, Culture, and Leadership Development. And then currently at this moment, I am advising a few organizations on employee experience, culture, and transformation.
Wow, just a few things that you're working on. Love it. That's so great. And then Liz, can you introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little about the connecting work you do within organizations? I find it so fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Penny. I am a career program architect and implementer for programs, services in youth development, community building, teen employment, education, and most recently in the JavaScript engineering education game through boot camps, kind of high-end boot camps in the San Francisco Bay Area. I typically picked up, I have just another little piece that could be relevant to your listeners. I typically pick up projects in their infancy through scaling phase. So commonly I'm involved in teams where there's an idea and we need a blueprint, or a blueprint and we need to make it alive in the world, or it's alive in the world and we need to build it into multiple sites or settings. So kind of pioneering scaling work. And also I get picked up sometimes for deep rehab work. Like we have a thing and it's alive in the world, and now we need to re-envision or re-energize kind of the program that we have going on. I worked with YMCAs across the country. Hack Reactor is a software engineering boot camp in San Francisco, and also a nonprofit here in Berkeley, Rising Sun Energy Center, from its infancy to multiple site locations.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that work that you've done is so impactful here as we're all facing this pandemic that none of us have faced before. So we're all blazing trails as we look at what this is. So to set the stage, I know, Tonille, you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on and how the workforce is shifting. What can we, before we jump into that, I'd love to talk to Liz about, from your background, like what can we watch out for as we think about major shifts in our organizations and we're making those decisions? Like what are those things we should keep in our mind right now?
Yeah, so I thought about this a lot before the call, and I tried to get it down to like, a couple pieces that can be useful for folks in times of great change, change that we didn't expect, change that we didn't want, change that we don't know how to do well. I find that there's a couple principles that have helped guide me, and I'd love to offer them for your listeners. Thinking about leading or describing change, I think about how to generate a plan that has reversibility or changeability. There's nothing worse than sinking your anchor in a plan to find out that was the wrong plan. So I think a lot about how to build in reversibility or changeability into some type of plan. I think a lot about how to keep the front line to the C-suite on the same page, right? So how do we, when in times of great change, it becomes incredibly hard to tell, are we still on the rails? Like, what would on the rails look like? Like, how do I know if this is going well? So building joint markers about how we're going to know if it's going well, and then what's my do now, either as a C-suite or as a frontline person. What's my do now if it is going well, and what's my do now if it's not going well? Because for sure, in times of change, it's going to go well and not go well. That's what's going to happen. So does my team know what to do when they see these things that we know are going to happen? So what are the markers of going well? So reversibility, what are the markers of going well? And then what's the do now on not going well or going well? And then finally, how to lead with transparency about uncertainty. When we try to mask uncertainty, a number of things start to happen. And when we allow uncertainty to be part of the conversation, healthfully, calmly, with respect, then a certain number of things start to happen. So those are 3 principles. We could go into the how to on each of them, but reversibility, what's going well and what's my do nows, and how do we allow uncertainty to be part of the conversation?
Awesome. I think I'm going to take that clip and start playing it maybe every morning before I make family decisions, work decisions. That's so great. Thank you for sharing from your experience there, Liz. And then Tonille, let's jump over to today's challenge that we're all kind of making those plans for and thinking about what does uncertainty look like there. So what are you seeing today as like new operating models in our new world?
Yeah, I mean, I think business models have certainly evolved and will continue to evolve to offer more remote-friendly services and products, really leveraging the technology that already exists, and also investing more in emerging technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, and automation. I'm seeing a lot of that. And of course, this, has and will continue to impact people practices like never before. I mean, we definitely got here suboptimally during the crisis, but we've learned a lot. And I think one of the big things we've learned is that, first of all, there's a place to bring your humanity to work. That's a big thing now. I mean, this crisis has really bonded us because we've gotten to see and share in our leaders and colleagues' vulnerability and humanness as we've navigated this together. And it's given us a reason to, check in at the beginning of a meeting or turn on our cameras during that Zoom call, make that extra call just to see how someone's doing. And then I think the second thing is that it's given us an excuse for balance, which we really needed. When this crisis hit, I think most people were already approaching burnout since we're always on. And this pause has really given many of us more time for wellness, sleep, spending time with loved ones, and really shown us that people need greater choices in determining how their work and personal time fit together. And then along these lines, we've learned that we need more flexibility. So technology has really changed the way we work and the way that things get done today. And with the increasing bleeding of work into life, flexibility and remote work really allow us to better integrate the two instead of being suffocated by the former. I think in an ideal scenario, we obviously wouldn't be homeschooling our kids and caring for parents while we're working from home. But in this crisis, we've seen that remote work works better than most companies had anticipated. And going forward, as companies rethink their operating models, a much higher level of remote working will be expected from everybody. And along these lines, now that we've seen how effective remote working is, and with companies looking to cut costs at times, I think the level of business travel we've seen in the past will never be the same. But it also, comes opportunities for improving diversity in our organizations because people can work remotely, which means you can find talent in a much wider span of the globe instead of just in your own backyard.
Awesome. Any other predictions kind of as part of what does that new normal look like?
Well, there's quite a few things. The main themes that I'm seeing are, first of all, of course, remote work first or remote work friendly, at least, workplaces, and taking lots of safety precautions as people return to workplaces. So along these lines, people will still gather for work, but there'll be more people working remotely, first of all, and a lot of the large headquarters we're seeing and hearing will probably go away. Companies may open like regional hubs or have smaller headquarter facilities that mainly serve as an elaborate conference conference center or like a status symbol for recruiting top talent, while that focused work can actually be done remotely because we've done it. So now we realize, okay, we don't need all that real estate space, that expensive building in the middle of Manhattan. And then for those who do keep offices, there will be much more deliberately designed to ensure cleanliness, socially distanced desks. They'll likely include different teams of staff rotating days in the office with their remote work days. And then, of course, the wearing of masks in the office. And then things like on-the-job medical screening will also become the norm, at least for a while, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. And that kind of brings us back to Liz thinking like new can be hard, normally is hard. So what's some advice that you've given to folks who are kind of facing this reality of remote work being longer than expected? This is kind of in perpetuity, as you know, we're wanting to ensure there's buy-in across different levels and how this is being done. I'm eager to hear some of your thoughts in this space.
Yeah, and I actually had a question for you about that. When you think about like wanting to create buy-in across levels, I think like a manager level or kind of above. But you also said like helping folks get used to like, work from home longer than we thought. And I wasn't sure if some of your listeners have like a first person need about that. Like I am the one working from home longer than I thought, or like, my team is working from home longer than we all thought. Is there any clarity on the need for your listeners, or should
Yeah, let's think about like for our teams, although you're right, that's a whole nother session that we're all also needing to think through. But for now, let's think of like our teams. Thank you.
So I think, I mostly hang out in circles that I would say are small or gritty or are boots on the ground, right? Like small, punchy teams that like are the ones doing the thing, right? Rather than like a large major player like a Google or something like that, right? Like I'm in like more smaller camps, small agile camps. So in those spaces, some of the things that have been helpful for me with teams is that the context clues on what's expected are much harder to come by and much more valuable for the group. So I would say context clues in clarity about the culture that we're going for, right? Hey, the expectation is that you sign in every day by 9. And when I say 9, I mean 9:01 is late, if that's true, right? And if that's not true, then make that clear. Hey, the expectation is that I hear from you before noon, right? Like whatever the expectation is, have useful expectations that lead to your end goal, right? Like if you do service, I do a lot of service work. So being cheerful, in a good mood and emotionally available is a requirement of the staff. That's pretty hard in these times. So if it's a requirement, then be clear on what that looks like. What it looks like is, right, that when I approach you first thing in the morning, there's some type of available affect on your face, right? Or, I expect complete sentences in Slack. Please, no shorthand. Or shorthand is fine. Whatever it is for your team, right? Like, when are we going to check in? What are the expectations around professionalism in language? When do we get to kvetch together? Right? When do we not get to kvetch together? And like part of the job is to have an amiable affect, right? And then when is that not part of the job, right? So just being ultra clear about the cultural markers that you're going for and making sure that those markers are tied to a reasonable vision of your end goal, right? It wouldn't be reasonable to say, be in a good mood all the time. In my opinion, that wouldn't be reasonable. But it also is unreasonable to be like, yeah, bring all your stuff to any work meeting that you want to, because we see you as a whole person. Any meeting you want to, any attitude you want, like that wouldn't make sense either. So how do I clarify the expectations around this is really hard? What that means is we're going to double down on the essentials, and here they are. And what that means is we're going to expand room for the non-essentials, and here they are. Take more time off, leave early, right? Et cetera, whatever it is.
Awesome. And then as part of that conversation, do you recommend that always being kind of the voice of a manager of a team, or how do we kind of engage different people in keeping those guardrails and helping people see both of those two buckets?
Yeah. So I think I prefer a layered and like scoped spaces to engage the question of how is this all going? So I like to clarify we're going to have meetings led by employees to surface their pain points, for example. And there, you're not going to hear a manager leading the show. I'm not going to be the manager that's like, but I just, right? oh, we're going to have an employee who's sort of vetted or trained or respected by their peers leading a pain point surfacing session, right? Or we're going to have an anonymous feedback survey, depending on how the trust level goes between different layers of your organization. Sometimes anonymous surveys work well. Sometimes small sessions work well, right? Like sometimes employee-led sessions work well, or a certain manager-led session, right? Topics tend to help people. This is a kvetching session. We're just going to surface pain points. This is a solutioning session, right? We're going to talk about how to do the thing. Let's list our yay hoorays, and let's list what's really tanked. I think the point I'm trying to get to is clarifying for people where their experience should be surfaced, not what experience should be surfaced. It's all viable right now, basically, for the teams that I work in. But we don't want to use every color crayon at every meeting, right? So your question was about how to get buy-in across, and I'm saying something like, yeah, creating spaces with different leaders, different tones, different topics, and different modalities, and then letting people know what you did with that information. There's nothing worse than being like, we want to hear what you think, and no one knows what happened with that information. I mean, nothing shuts down a conversation faster, right? So being ultra meticulous about this is what was surfaced, this is what we're doing, this is what we're ignoring from that because we don't think it's relevant, and this is what we're actioning, right? Not ignoring, but you know what I mean. So I guess maybe that now I finally at the end got to my number one point, right? Which is clarify for people what you're doing with what they're giving you. Otherwise they stop giving you information, right?
Yeah, that's good, especially when the information that we're asking for and looking for is personal and requires a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you. I want to kind of keep going on communication a little bit and thinking, tossing it over to Tonille. What are some wins, you can share with us around communication? That's like a core tenet to a lot of the work that you put out.
Yeah, and first of all, I would love to say, and Liz, I love what you had to say about, the clarity piece. I think that's super duper important. And I also think the why, right? So if you're asking people to tell you something, or you're telling people these are our expectations, I find it really helpful too to get buy-in if you're telling them why you want them to do it and what that effect is going to be. How does that contribute to the strategy, et cetera? And then to your point, also the co-creating with people at all levels. I think that's a great way to get buy-in across the org. So what I would say when it comes to communication, in addition to what Liz said, which was fantastic, I think you'll definitely want to over-index on the frequency and the level of candor to ensure that nothing is unclear, because not that it couldn't be unclear when you're in person, but it certainly could be unclear when you're not in person. So at an organizational level, I think it's important to over-communicate updates and hold some of those ask me anything sessions frequently and let people just come and ask any kind of question, be as vulnerable as they need to be, and having leaders making sure those leaders are coached, if they aren't naturally this way, to be very authentic and very being vulnerable in those sessions so people feel very comfortable sharing. I think that's important. And I also think, in the past, companies may have had quarterly or maybe biannual all hands, but today they're holding them weekly, bi-weekly, monthly at the most. And I think that's really important, especially in this time, to provide updates, maybe introductions to new employees, depending on how large the organization is, and then also opportunities for their people to ask those questions. And then as Liz was discussing as well, I think the feedback mechanisms are always key. I mean, this is in any situation, it's key to improving the employee experience, but especially when teams are remote, it's especially important to prioritize this, since we can't see body language all the time, and we can't see all the things that we see when we're physically together. And then I think at the team level, I think in addition to regular standing, one-on-ones and team meetings and things that you already have, I've seen some organizations do daily stand-up meetings, some of them even twice a day, like in the morning and the afternoon, just depending on your culture. And then frequent touch bases throughout the day to allow managers to really keep a pulse on what's going on, surface issues, and then help their teams solve those problems effectively. And I think this is also, a really powerful time to engage and mobilize teams by reaffirming the organization's purpose and how they as individuals and teams contribute to that organization. They contribute to customers and the community and each other, and just kind of really building in that why and that meaning piece, because depending on the person's situation, whether they live alone or they're caring for kids or parents or who knows what they're doing, everybody's been and is and probably will for a while continue to go through some difficulties in this situation. And I think, really help people connect with that why, I think that gives them a little bit of a lighthouse, and that's always a helpful thing, but especially in this time. And then I think also sharing, some of these stories throughout the organization and beyond can be extremely energizing, sharing them with your customers if they're appropriate, sharing them with other folks in the organization. I've also seen a couple other things I've seen companies do like an all day or a couple times a day Zoom meeting, just leaving it open. And so people.
Tonille, I think we might be losing you here. Maybe you're just holding some open Zoom space. You never know. Cool. Yeah, I love what she's saying right here of just like having that time that if someone wants to be able to come in and see someone else on the screen, they can. I think that's a huge win. Here, I'm going to send her out of here and see if we can get her back in.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, and I think the last thing is that I would say is that I've seen a lot of organizations just really go crazy with the virtual socializing events, which is not a bad thing, but I think, just everything in its own time, like game nights, dance parties, daily, pre-lunch plank offs and happy hours, all that kind of stuff. So I think just really the big piece right now, I think with communication is, like I said, clarity, over communicating for sure, and just really putting in that candor and just really building in the social activities and being really deliberate about it, I think are the key points at this point.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, there's some easy wins that we can kind of start this week, which is always really exciting, as well as knowing this is part of a broader organizational shift. Yeah. So if you have questions, definitely throw them in the chat. I have another question here for Liz around like, what's an example you have of something creative you've had to do when you're thinking of like, okay, how do I make this culture shift happen in my organization?
Sure. So I think, and I'll take a page out of your book here, Tonille. Also, like, I think one theme that's really emerging for me is how do you curate the attention that you want your team to be paying? Because everything is grabbing our attention right now, and everything can, or my attention, and everything can seem important, right? And helping your team curate, this should not get my attention, this should, right? This, like the why, for example, or the when, or the what, which pieces do you want me to be paying attention to? And so specifically, more recently, I was serving as a dean of students at a software engineering boot camp that is a huge service provider, huge service drain. So 13 hours a day, 13 contact hours a day with 100 people who are expecting an elite experience 6 days a week. Right? So the students are there 11 hours a day plus 2 hours of contact on top of that. And we're on the hook to curate an environment to provide an educational, stimulating environment for these folks that's going to carry them through JavaScript education, which is quite challenging. So it's a huge staff expense. So the staff are giving 6 days, 11 hours a day, 6 days a week. Not any one person, but right. And so one of the things that can happen, because it's a gang of go-getters, right? The school attracts go-getters as staff or as students that people want to go and get, and they have burnout, obviously, with that kind of schedule. So one of the things that we were working on as a team of managers is like, how do you encourage people to take time off when they feel like time off is going to impact my job performance? Right? Like every day I'm not here, I'm not attending to the students and how they're developing. If the students aren't developing, I, as their teacher, didn't do my job. So like I need to be here every moment that the students are developing, and you get staff naturally burning out and quitting their jobs, of course, or rotating out, we could say. Mm-hmm. So specifically with the idea of curating attention, we just, I added days off in as a performance metric. Hey, like we would like everybody to take X number of days off every quarter. And if you do that, you get an A+ on this performance metric. And if you don't, you're missing your performance metric to some degree. Or we have to, like I want you to know that it's a marker of high performance of folks that get promoted, that they're taking their time off, right? And then we were able to have a conversation about like, okay, but if I take time off, my other performance might actually go down. So like, how do we negotiate that together? We were a small team, so we had a lot of time to scope that out, make sure nobody's surprised. But it was kind of a surprising move. People were unclear what I meant by like, hey, like taking some of your time off is part of high performance in this job. And what that means is if you're not taking time off, we're gonna put that into your performance plan, right? Like we want you to take nourishing time away from this space, and I want it bad enough that it goes in the job description, right? So there's all kinds of creative ways, that is just one example of curating attention. When you put something on their weekly performance check-in, people start to attend to it, right? People want to do a good job in their job. Yeah. So that's one example of curating attention. Of course, there's many others.
No, I love that. That's huge. And I find that comes into play a lot now when we think of permission giving. And like you mentioned at the very beginning, Liz, of like kind of defining what are we paying attention to right now? What are we not paying attention to? What's our plan A? What's our plan B? How do we know that our plan is going the right way? And one of those metrics that you would say is people are taking time off. And where are we going with that? We want people to be really present and healthy.
And of course, it's not always or I have to, right? Like there's all kinds of weird HR pieces, all kinds of things, right? But one idea is a healthy employee is a refreshed employee, right? And we're so serious about that I'm willing to stake my job performance and yours on us acquiring a true sense of refreshment, not a faked, I feel really refreshed. No, right? So that authenticity that I think Tonille was talking about, like, it's elusive, but so worth it. So worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is so great. I find that in this time, I think all of our mental capacity is stretched really thin, that where managers and leaders are able to focus our attention, guide us with communication so we know exactly what to think about. And then we can have our own original amazing thoughts there. But yeah, I find that really valuable when I've had leaders share that to me. So thank you both for that. It doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So if anything else either of you would like to add, please do. Everything that's come out of your mouth so far has been phenomenal. So please share. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I honestly don't think I have anything else on my end. I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, if anyone's interested, Liz is available by email. I'm just throwing it up here on the screen, as well as Tonille. So just their names at gmail.com. Thank you both for being part of this. Thanks to everyone who tuned in live, as well as everyone who I'm sure will be avidly watching the replay videos as we look to help our small teams really deliver great work and help our people do great work as we're in this kind of challenging time. But it's going to be here for a while. So thank you all for digging in and helping us get there. All right, see everyone next week. We're going to talk more about onboarding. All right, thanks everyone.